This is Jones's Ice Cream Parlor. For thousands of African Americans over the years, it has been a beacon, signaling them that Idlewild was not far away because they have just reached the last stop before taking a right turn off M37 North onto 8th Street in Baldwin. Once on 8th Street, you know that when you pass the fish hatchery, you're on Baldwin Road. That's when the anxiety would begin, because the fun and activities of Idlewild were just minutes away.
It was something that you'd never believe. It's stranger than fiction, some of it you think, you know. And we, at parking, everybody had a Cadillac, just about all big cars. You never took your keys out. You pull up there, that's it. We had a fellow, he's still living there. Oh, he's a McKinney. He lives out in Woodland Park. He would make, he said, just pull it up. That's it. Pull your car, pull your car. They'd be lined up all the way around to the bridge, guys trying to get in. Double people. Trying to get in there to see the show.
In the 50s along the Gold Coast, the principal street that ran around the lake, one wouldn't be a bit surprised if you'd see maybe a Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, ward politicians out of the Chicago area. It wouldn't be unusual to see Joe Louis up there. We're talking about the who's who of Black America, especially Midwestern America, had property in Idlewild, and they spend time there.
And for the younger people, from the Flamingo Bar on the island, right across from the nightclub, they had a skating rink. So the young kids could skate, and the older people could go to a nightclub floor show, and they come and get the kids. Plus, we was on the beach, it was vacation time, yeah. We had basketball stars, lawyers, doctors, pilots, people that made money in the city and that came here to enjoy themselves, to come up into the woods to entertain for the summer, and a few for the winter. But most they came for the entertainment and to get out the city. And it was beautiful people. A lot of beautiful people.
Well, it had a significant impact on everyone's life because, one, Idlewild was the mecca of Black success in the Midwest and possibly in America. Anybody who was anybody in the Black community had either been to Idlewild or was coming to Idlewild or heard of Idlewild. It was the largest, oldest, most prestigious Black resort in America. It had 2 clubs. You take some of the other places, Martha's Vineyard wasn't even thought of. You take in Indiana, there's a place, I can't even think of the name of it now, French something, or not French Lick, but another place up near Fort Wayne. Again, just a small little enclave. Idlewild was a mecca.
At that time, there was you could rent a paddle boat and paddle around the lake. They even had a good-sized speedboat that you could go on a cruise around Idlewild Lake at that time. Yeah, and you could go horseback riding. Sarge had horseback riding on the south end of the lake. Just tons of things to do.
People basically were sort of swingers like, and I would say young. Well, it cut across all ages, young to the old. But if you just wanted to have a good time, have some fun, come to Idlewild.
Idlewild Week was when the clubs, specific clubs came from each city, and then they co-mingled and gave parties and invited each other. Good. So that was the what happened at night. Cars were all over the place. But then after the club closed, you had to go to Club El Morocco. We attended at Club El Morocco at 8 o'clock in the morning, go home and go to bed, and meet at the lake on what we call the island, across from the Flamingo, at 3 o'clock every day. And that's where we would go swimming, just sit around and talk and play and run around.
In 1912, the Idlewild Resort Company was founded by E.G. Branch. Idlewild Lake then was known as Crooked Lake, but the members of the company preferred the name Idlewild Lake. Some say the name was synonymous with the intentions of the group to have the men idle and the women wild. The Idlewild Resort Company originally consisted of E.G. Branch, Albert Branch of White Cloud, who happened to be white, and H.E. Wright and W.M. Lemon of Chicago, who were African Americans. They ran the sales department for the company. 3 years later, in 1915, Leela Wilson and husband Herman O. from Chicago bought 80 acres of land surrounding what they aptly named Paradise Lake. They built a hotel, a grocery store, and a Paradise nightclub, bringing paved roads and electricity to the area for the first time. The Wilsons were African Americans. At this time in history, Europe was at war, and the United States would soon be committed to the effort. In 1918, many African Americans would be leaving for France, even though the armed forces were segregated. Also at this time, many African Americans were moving to the north to enjoy the fruits of the Industrial Revolution. They were finding employment in cities like Detroit, Chicago, Indianapolis, and Cleveland. But segregation was still a part of life. Even though many had expendable incomes, they couldn't frequent white-only establishments. Thus, the beginning of Idlewild. This is Dr. Ben Wilson. Dr. Wilson is a professor of black studies at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Dr. Wilson has been involved with several projects on Idlewild, including publishing a book on the subject. Here, he expresses his views on how segregation helped to create this paradise called Idlewild.
50s and the 60s, because of the heinous Jim Crow system that was imposed upon black folk, a lot of African Americans saw Idlewild as an R&R, a rest and relaxation area, from racism and the hustle and bustle of urban city life, be it Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, or even Louisville, or Chattanooga. I mean, I can keep going on all kinds of cities because black folk came to the area. In the 50s, along the Gold Coast, the principal street that ran around the lake, one wouldn't be a bit surprised if you'd see maybe a Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, ward politicians out of the Chicago area. It wouldn't be unusual to see Joe Louis up there. We're talking about the who's who of black America, especially Midwestern America, had property in Idlewild, and they spend time there. Now, of course, if you were a poor indigent person living in Chicago or Detroit, and I could afford property in Idlewild, my peers would think that I was kind of hanky because I could go to Idlewild. During the 1950s and 60s, it was also like a vital stopping point on the Chitlin circuit for young black musicians, performers who were on the make, who were excluded from places like the Fontainebleau or excluded from Caesar's Palace. We're talking about the likes of people like a young man who just came out the Navy named Bill Cosby performing there, Sammy Davis Jr. when he was tap dancing with his uncle and his dad. Even before that, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, Ferdinand Fatswaller wrote a song called Michigan Waters Make Me Blue in Idlewild. Aretha Franklin, the Four Tops, Bebop Carter, Al Hibbert, a who's who of black entertainers spend time in Idlewild. So in the 50s and the 60s, Idlewild was popping.
This is the Honorable Judge Ben Logan of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Judge Logan's father, Ben Logan Sr., was the last person to own the famous Flamingo Club. He talks about the impact segregation had on African Americans.
Idlewild was the mecca of black success in the Midwest and possibly in America. Anybody who was anybody in the black community had either been to Idlewild or was coming to Idlewild or heard of Idlewild. It was the largest, oldest, most prestigious black resort in America. It had two clubs. You take some of the other places, Martha's Vineyard wasn't even thought of. You take in Indiana, there's a place, I can't even think of the name of it now, French something, or not French Lick, but another place up near Fort Wayne. Again, just a small little enclave. Idlewild was a mecca. Anyone who was anyone, from Arthur Prysock to Jackie Wilson to Sarah Vaughan, Dinah Washington, the Four Tops, the Temptations, any entertainer who was worth his or her salt came through Idlewild. Partly because even the guy who's still around, I bet you he remembers Idlewild, James Brown, because James Brown has been to Idlewild. Because there was no place for the black entertainer to go. There was the Chitlin Circuit, which was the little malls and palls around the country. Idlewild made an impact. And it made an impact when you came and saw the strong influence of African Americans running business, making money, judges, lawyers, politicians, number men, you name it. All type of businessmen. There were after-hour joints, there were legitimate businesses, and there were illegitimate businesses. There was all types of activity going on, but basically it was an experience in blackness. Other than being in Harlem in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I don't believe there could ever be any experience as great as the experience in Idlewild. And it stays on your mind because it teaches you that you can overcome. It teaches you that there is power in blackness. Because keep in mind, in the 40s and 50s, a lot of individuals were trying to pass. And that shows you the mindset. Because white was the power, and everybody was trying to straighten their hair with conch and all the rest of that crap to look white. High yellow was in, and until black power came, African American sisters and brothers were catching hell. And as a practical matter, Idlewild helped strengthen the fact that being black is being right.
The Idlewild Resort Company began organizing excursions from major cities in the Midwest, with as many as 100 people coming to see this place where colored people could hunt, fish, and enjoy the beaches. During this time, all of these amenities were off limits to them in their respective cities. After the visits, the IRC would send salesmen to those cities to sell lots and organize each city into a lot owners association, a tradition that has lasted to this day. Lots were 25 by 100 feet and sold for $35 each, with $6 down and $1 per week. Among the notables who helped settle Idlewild at this time were Dr. Daniel Hell Williams, who performed the first open heart surgery in Chicago in 1893. Dr. Williams' prominence brought other well-known African-American entrepreneurs to Idlewild, such as the first African-American female millionaire, Madam C.J. Walker, who bought her land from Dr. Williams. Other prominent African-Americans who purchased land at that time were W.E.B. Du Bois, founder of the NAACP and first editor of the Crisis magazine. Alfonso Lewis is an attorney who has been going to Idlewild since 1938. He has fond memories of the Lot Owners Association.
At that time, there were clubs that groups from each city, each of like 6 cities that would come up, and they would generally live in the same motel, the same area. Of course, some of them also had cottages, so that you would have cottage parties. So and so would have a party, and so would have a party. Sometimes it'd be 2 or 3 a day, and then at night, each club would have a party. Now, in later years, the Detroit Idlewilders finally built the Idlewilders Club on Lake Idlewild, over in this would have been the south northeast corner of Lake Idlewild, which is a very nice club. But then the other clubs, like St. Louis Club, would give their parties down in the southern part of Idlewild on Foreman Road, south of Baldwin Road, and then they would sometimes give it. There was a motel, another motel where the Cleveland stayed, and the Chicago had stayed various places. So then Chicago finally developed two parties. So you would have a party. Each club would give a party sometime on the same day.
In the 1940s, Idlewild came of age. The anticipation of World War II brought more good-paying jobs to African Americans, and the migration north became an avalanche. Thus, the emerging African American middle class needed an outlet, and Idlewild was just the place. Dr. Ben Wilson has very strong feelings about the reasons Idlewild began to emerge in the 40s and 50s. Here, he expresses those feelings.
I did realize that it was an R&R for black folk who were middle class, blue collar, who were trying to escape the omnipresent racism that they had to encounter, whether it was in Kentucky, where a lot of Idlewilders came from, Illinois, Michigan, as far north as Medicine Hat, Canada. It did give me a considerable amount of pride to realize that African Americans were not like the stereotypical images that were presented in the Hollywood, motion picture industry. And then sometimes in textbooks, when people think about those African Americans who migrated from the South to the North, they always talk about those individuals who were either sharecroppers or tenant farmers. They never talk about those individuals who were middle-class professionals who also migrated north, following their patrons. If I were a doctor in Bogalusa, Louisiana, and all of my clients were sharecroppers, when they migrated north, I better go too. And as a result of those individuals coming up to the north, in this particular case to Michigan, Michigan, water wonderland, land along the Great Lakes was prohibited by cost in some cases for African Americans who just migrated from the South. But there were a lot of inland spring-fed lakes. And on this inland spring-fed lake, which eventually was called, I think, Mud Lake or Crooked Lake, it eventually became Idlewild. It gave me a tremendous amount of esteem to realize that I am doing nothing but pimping those who came before us, because they laid the foundation for this great resort. And now, as a historian, it's my job now to make sure it lasts, especially the memories of people, so the young kids would be exposed to this Idlewild experience. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of the most important segments in the African American experience in the state of Michigan, aside from the Underground Railroad piece.
At the end of World War II, African American soldiers coming home to America found the landscape for them had not changed. Despite serving their country, even African American veterans in the North still had to deal with segregation, and that included the entertainment industry. But Idlewild was available, and many of the great entertainers of our time began to play Idlewild, much to the delight of the people who were there to witness it. Judge Ben Logan.
My fondest memories was the fact that it was a family gathering. I always went to Idlewild with my mother and my brother and other family members. My father was unable to come with us because he had to stay in Dayton and run the businesses. And so consequently, Idlewild for us was a family affair with our mother. My first trip to Idlewild, we did not own a cabin at that time. We stayed in cottages right next to Lee John's Ice Cream and right across from Roxana's Bar and Grill. And other times we've stayed at other locations until my mother's grandmother passed, and we bought her cabin in the corner of Lake Drive and Palm. And we refurbished it, remodeled it, almost rebuilt it. And spent a lot of time now after that visiting Idlewild. As I've gotten older, my time is limited, and I don't get to Idlewild near like I used to. My mother goes there from sometime in July through the middle of middle of September, and then she'll come down and stop in Grand Rapids and spend some time here and then head home. I remember Idlewild when it had the Flamingo nightclub and bar and the Giles Hotel. You could smell the shrimp sometimes right there from the shrimp hut right there on the beach. But best of all was the hamburger restaurant that was there that fixed a kind of a special hamburger where they grilled the buns and also grilled onions. And that was the automatic piece that went on the hamburger. Then you had the Paradise Lounge and Arthur Bragg's and the entertainers. I was always impressed with the strong black power of influence in entertainers. As a young man, meeting Brooks Benton was one of the most important pieces of my life. And watching Brooks Benton on the telephone negotiate a business deal, that was impressive to see an African American in the power position of demanding, of directing, and of taking positions as to what he will and will not do. I had the opportunity to see Arthur Prysock, who stopped his show because somebody in the audience called him boy. He said, "Sing, boy." He stopped. He said, "There's no boys up here on the stage, and I want you out of here." And he would not continue until the person was evicted. The audience literally evicted the person. The audiences generally were about 60% majority of white and 40% black, especially at the fiesta. Because all folks throughout that whole northern area, from Traverse City to Grand Rapids, would come into Idlewild for the entertainment. They would go to the Paradise, and then once the Paradise was full, then the overflow would come to the Flamingo. And then the Flamingo show started about a half hour after Paradise, just for that benefit. They would both have two shows. After the people would view the show at the Flamingo, they would then go over to the Paradise. The people who were at the Paradise would come over to the late show at the Flamingo. And people would make an evening of it. I remember the police officer, Polk, who stood on the island and directed traffic as traffic came through. And as I got older and I started driving, I remember he'd raise hell because it was always cute to go through the island, coming around past Letman's, past Giles Hotel, cross the island, past the Flamingo to the left and the skating rink to the right, and then take off down that hill and then veer off to the right on Lake Drive, and then I was almost home by then. And every time I'd get down there, I'd pass him, I'd take off, and you see his hand go up, and next time I'd come through there, he'd stop me. "Young man, you doing a little too much speeding." But those are some of the fondest memories. And even the skating rink. Things were not the best they could be, but they were the best they could be for us. The skating rink did not have a flat surface. It had a warped floor. It had posts in the middle of the floor. You had to put money in the jukebox to make it play. But it was good enough for us to make do, and we enjoyed ourselves. I still have a little controversy with Roy Roberts, who believes that he was the best skater up there, and clearly he wasn't. I was the best skater up there, and Roy never, but unfortunately he never came up there when I was there. He must have heard my reputation and always avoided. But the better skater than probably both of us was Stumpy. Stumpy was one of the excellent skaters up there, and his brother. Um, they could do the Uncle Willie, and they could do all those good things. We learned to do it all. I learned to skate as a matter of a challenge because a young lady outskated me, and I just said, "Well, that's not going to happen." Went home to Dayton and skated all winter. So when I went back, I was ready.
There were many individuals that played a significant role in the development of entertainment in Idlewild, such as Sonny Roxborough, Ziggy Johnson, and Arthur Braggs. But Phil Giles, the owner of the Giles Hotel and the Flamingo Club, located on the island itself, was probably the most memorable character. Mama Helen Curry was a cab driver in Detroit in 1937 and was also the driver for Phil Giles. She was responsible for transporting the entertainers from Detroit to Idlewild in the 40s and 50s. She reminisces about the type of person Phil Giles was in the heyday of Idlewild.
Because we had two places, open, Paradise Club and the Flamingo, you know. And I don't know if you remember Phil Giles. Did you remember Phil Giles? big guy. Like, and coming, I can tell this. I can tell this. I hope I can tell this. I'm gonna tell it anyway. You can race it what you know. We were coming from Detroit, and we had to stop the gas up. So we went in this place. Had the, the would be the entertainers now. They were would be's, And he said, fill up all those cars out there. The guy filled it up, and he came in there and he ate. He got wanted to order. He said, I want to order some food for them. He looked at you. He said, we don't serve blacks in here. Now that's coming out from up here, way out. And he says, well, you don't. My goodness. He said, that's my show. He said, well, I'm sorry. He said, take that gas out because I'm not buying it. I'm not paying for it. He said, I can't do that. He said, okay, let's go. And come on back up here. He would do those things. But, I mean, and then I got to tell this one. You haven't got to this one. We had ordered beer by the carload. And this guy would come in. He said, empty it in there. And we had Pfeiffer and this other was, it wasn't Stoves. I don't remember Stoves. Yeah, Stoves and Pfeiffer. And he loaded it. He said, my God, you got a lot of, black folks sure do eat up, drink a lot of beer. He didn't say it, the black folk. He said it like it was. And he said, yes. He didn't know it was right. But he was, like, he said, well, I tell you, you see that clock up there? He said, now, it's 10 o'clock. And you've been bringing in beer. He said, I want you to come and take every beer that you brought in here out. A man said, oh, come on, you kidding. He said, okay, you better keep on, start taking it. Because the guy saw he meant it. He said, I'm sorry, I thought you was a white man. I just got it. He said, well, whatever you thought, but you better hear him. The man get bed. Except so he wasn't playing. You should have seen him getting that beer out.
Mr. Bill McClure is the current owner of the Red Rooster in Idlewild. The Red Rooster used to be Rosanna's Tavern and was owned by Sonny Roxborough, who was the brother of the manager of Joe Louis, one of the many famous people that had summer homes in Idlewild. Mr. McClure, who was a retired Army colonel, has remodeled the historical club and made it the focal point of the new Idlewild. McClure, who also ran for the mayor of Indianapolis in 1972, has some thoughts on what happened after integration.
We had a lot of clubs here in that area. As I said before, this was a spot for entertainment. Entertainers couldn't go everywhere in America. It was during that era, and it was in the 60s. And then after integration came about, everybody fled and ran, as I said before. But we had clubs like Pearls, the Flamingo, the Paradise Club, and they brought in the best entertainment in the country. It was they call it the Black Circuit, and they couldn't play everywhere. They couldn't play Vegas and all the places. But as soon as integration came in, they were open, and I guess they lost their feelings and they left, and they've never returned.
Mr. John Meeks has been coming to Idlewild since 1954. He sold his dry cleaning business in Detroit and purchased the old Morton's Motel. He totally renovated it, and now he lives in Idlewild year-round and is a driving force behind revitalizing Idlewild. He has some poignant views on the decline of Idlewild after integration.
It will never, never, never be like it was in the old days, simply because there are the type of acts that they had here back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. That same caliber of acts only perform at gambling casinos. No ordinary nightclub can afford the salaries that they demand now. So you can go to Chicago, Detroit, any place. You will find very few places that have top-of-the-line entertainment. You're not going to get a nationally famous entertainer to perform in a small club because they can't afford the salaries that they demand. This was a resort for blacks, and the blacks that came here and enjoyed the place or moved here, uh, they couldn't go anyplace else. Had Idlewild had top of the line motels, restaurants, and clubs, first class ones, uh, the people would have continued to come. But why stay in a motel, a 10-room motel with 2 bathrooms? You know, why stay there when you can go 50 or 60 miles and have first class accommodation? Same thing with restaurants. They were small, inadequate restaurants, but during the time when you couldn't go anyplace else, they were able to survive. But when they were able to go to better places, then you go where you can get the most for your money.
Judge Logan talks about how the Civil Rights Act of 1964 destroyed African American business in America.
My father bought the Flamingo nightclub in 1964, and we owned the Flamingo up until 1980, when I sold it and negotiated the sale to Yates Township. What happened to Idlewild? And I can't say that white America was as devious as this would sound. That through integration, the Civil Rights Act of '64 killed all black business. You see, there were tremendous strides being moved with black business. There was the Gotham Hotel, there was the Roberts Hotel, there was the Pasco's Hotel. There were black enterprises and businesses throughout the community. Money was turning over 2 and 3 and 4 times. You had State Street, you had Fifth Street in Dayton, you had Division here. Every community had its mecca in terms of black business centers. And those black business centers were doing well. You had African American cleaners, grocery stores, dry cleaners, all types of black businesses that were doing well. And in '64, the Civil Rights Act, in essence, said, well, black America, you don't have to go to black businesses. Now come on over here to the white business, and we can do better. And it hit in such a surprise that most black businesses didn't even know it coming. It was almost like a sucker punch. It hit them without them even realizing that it was coming. And then all of a sudden, in '65, they had to now compete with, how can a little small grocery store compete with Myers? How can a little small hotel compete with the Holiday Inn? And Holiday Inn was the big chain at those days. How can Idlewild compete with Las Vegas? And that was the door that opened, you see. Before '64, Idlewild didn't have to compete with Las Vegas. There were no blacks in Las Vegas. They didn't allow blacks to come to Las Vegas. So Idlewild was competing with itself. Now we've got a whole different ball game. And it killed not only Idlewild, but it killed every black business in America. And if you look at businesses, most businesses have started, other than Jet and Ebony, from 1964 forward. Because before that, the businesses died. They were killed by virtue of the competition that was created by the Civil Rights Act.
Dr. Ben Wilson gives us his views on how the Civil Rights Act of 1964 affected Idlewild and how it will never be the same.
In the 1960s, when black folk were talking about civil rights, okay, once the Public Accommodations Act was passed, you begin to see the demise, the slow death of Idlewild. A lot of African Americans thought that 1964 meant integrate. That's the term they use, but they really meant desegregate. Okay? Black folk were thinking integration would be meeting in together in the middle. But to white folk, it meant, you leave what you got, you come to where I am. Now, as a result of that, Idlewild began to die. Now, white folks used to come from Traverse City to go to Idlewild to see the black performers because the black performers couldn't perform in the real exclusive clubs in Traverse City. But after 1964 and the Public Accommodation Acts, those exclusive clubs now told black musicians, hey, you can perform here. Okay? But the rest of y'all ain't performers. We just want Jackie Wilson up here. We just want Aretha here. We just want Della Reese to perform. So basically what we're talking about, it wasn't true integration at all. So as a result of black folk thinking of the integration, but in actuality it was desegregation, black folks stopped going to Idlewild because the black performers began to go to those places that their forebears once upon a time were borrowed from. Then you had that other element. That's the element which really is the residual effects of mental slavery on black folk. A lot of black folk believe that if there was a resort that was white owned, it certainly was better than ours, which we started as black. And so they began to desert Idlewild and go to places like the Fountain Blue in Miami. Now, as a kid growing up in the southern tip of Florida, Fort Lauderdale, going to Miami Beach was like crossing, leaving the homelands, going into Soweto, going into Johannesburg. By that I mean, at a certain time at night in Miami, they would pull up the drawbridges. So you couldn't get to Miami Beach. In addition to it, if you were black on Miami Beach, you had to have some kind of security badge as an indicator that you worked in one of the hotels, the Rec Bar, the Fountain Blue, or whatever. Now, I figure if you discriminate against my grandmother and my mother, and then 1964 comes along, the Civil Rights Act, and then you tell me I'm welcome to come, I'm going to tell you, you crazy, because my sense of history is still there. If you burn my grandmother, burn my mother, nowhere in the world I'm going to give you an opportunity to burn me. But to African Americans, they felt that now that we can go to the Caesar's Palace, it's white on, let's leave Idlewild and go to these white places. Now you begin to see people coming back to Idlewild, primarily as a result of 1968. In 1968, you began to see a new creature being born. This old creature used to be a Negro, but this new creature in 1968 became black. And that individual began to glamorize that which his forebears who were black started. She began to look at the history behind the thing. And you slowly began to see a trickle of people coming back to Idlewild. But granted, Idlewild would never be what it was from the 20s to 1960s. Nothing would ever be the same.
In the 1980s, African Americans were a part of mainstream America. When it came to leisure life, they could go wherever their economic status allowed. Idlewild became a distant memory. It appeared as though it never existed as the Black Eden of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It was even declared a ghost town in the 1980s. However, today, there's a different kind of Idlewild. The future will never be the past. But because of the clean lakes, the hunting, and the cost of land, Idlewild still has a significant role in African American life today.
I think Idlewild will be a place that everybody like to come up on the weekends in the summers and spend their summers here to enjoy the lake and enjoy their new homes. And after they get older and retire up here, where there isn't all this shooting and hollering and noise going on. They say it's so peaceful up here. People that come from the city said it's real peaceful up here. And well, that's one of the reasons I come back. And I lived in Grand Rapids most of my adult life. And I've been back up here since '84. And that's one of the reasons I come back up here. Of course, I got a spot on the lake. Can't everybody get a spot on the lake? But I have a spot on the lake, and that's another. To have a spot on the lake and the money that I pay for taxes and everything, if you wanted to do that in any other county or around Grand Rapids and everything, You know what it would cost to get on one of the lakes out there. It would cost, you'd have to be a millionaire to live on a lake there. Well, I'm not a millionaire, and I live on a lake, and I enjoy our lake as much as Reed, the people do in Grand Rapids, enjoy Reed's lake. And that's just you just got the freedom, and I'd like to have everybody come out and feel that freedom.
Charles Hamilton, who lives in Idlewild year-round, gives his thoughts on Idlewild in the 80s.
It's altogether different. All the old folks don't died out, and it's a second generation. And now mostly it was the old and the young. Now it's mostly the older folks. It just went from one to another one. You see, most of the young folks, age 20s, 30s, they don't care too much about it. They might come up with their parents, friends of the family or something like that, for the weekends. But to come to live and to stay, no. It's just mostly all anybody I say within 50 or older.
The people that have a vested interest in Idlewild today have a vision for the future and what Idlewild can be.
I would like to attract some people of magnitude who are that are able. We need some finances. We need some money. I'd like to attract some of the I've been talking a little bit to Oprah Winfrey. We need some people like that who are able to spread the message. There are very few black resorts left. We're holding on, but we just don't want to put that stigma that we're all black. We want to put the stigma that we welcome people, period, that are interested in keeping Idlewild alive. We want the lake. We don't want to differentiate with people. We don't want to have just the lake people, the locals. I think that was a criteria that I never did like in Idlewild. It's all about people. It's people. And with the new millennium, we need people that have values and that see what can happen and want to make it happen.
Big Star Lake is not that far from Idlewild. They have some facilities. Baldwin, of course, and that's important to know that Baldwin is the big city of that area, of course. And Baldwin is not a big city, quite frankly. Jones Ice Cream was always something very special. The bank has always been supportive of Idlewild, which was Lake County State Bank, both the Smith brothers. I know Bob has always been a very dear friend to our business enterprise when we were there. And even to me, he gave me student loans for me to continue my education. But Idlewild is not only in the mind, but it's in the reality. And we now have to carry it to another level into the 21st century. And I think we can do that through our youth and through our children, for them to appreciate the finer things of Idlewild and not let them be as spoiled. I mean, many youngsters think that Idlewild is like camping out, and it's not. I mean, they've got just as much modern equipment in Idlewild as in any place. I was an honorary fireman when I was there, by the way, and enjoyed the activity. Whenever there was a brush fire, you get the siren would go off at the fire station, and you'd go out to take charge of putting the fire out. Sometimes it was a travesty because you're talking about all volunteers. We got out there and didn't know how to make the water work, so we just start stepping on the fire. But that's all part of the grandeur of Idlewild. It's a magical place.
Well, it plays a vital role not only in Michigan's black history, but in the history of all of the black experience in America because of the pop culturists who perform there. And everybody knows, I hope everybody knows, maybe I'm the only one who feel this way, that when you think of pop culture, American popular culture, it's basically African American. Okay? So if you are a pop culturist and you realize that Idlewild was like a vital stopping point. I mean, Idlewild, Apollo, the Savoy, the clubs in Chicago, then Idlewild. These are the places that young entertainers would perform at. Okay? And if you're interested in popular culture, How can you be interested in the popular culturists but not where they performed? It's almost like being interested in James Brown, but you don't want to talk about the Apollo. So, it plays a vital role in Michigan's African American history, but it also plays just as important role in the pop cultural history of American performers.
Well, it meant that you could meet, have friends, and always part as friends. Come as friends, part as friends. Because as I told you, nobody ever had a fight. They had arguments, and usually about nothing.
Idlewild is back. It's not coming back. It's back. I opened my motel in '94, and almost each year my business will double. Each year it's progressively going up, 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 and up.
Today, Idlewild has become a haven for retirees of all colors who are seeking hunting, fishing, and clean lakes. It still has 3 environmentally sound lakes, but it will never be the same place of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But when you look at Idlewild, you can see African American history unfold in front of you as clear and beautiful as the lakes surrounding this tiny island. And when you think of what Idlewild was, Mama Helen sums it up best.
It was something that you'd never believe. It's stranger than fiction, some of it you think, you know.
Memphis, Monday morning. Oh, the summer rain is pouring down. Oh, yes, it is. Memphis, Monday morning. And the summer rain is pouring down. I keep reaching for